So Maureen Goodman is our guest. She's our speaker. She's the programme director of the Brahma Kumaris UK. She's based in London. She's also the Brahma Kumaris representative at the United Nations in Vienna. And through her work, she's active in many community groups, many community settings, including prisons, healthcare, education, youth, women's issues, interfaith dialogue, and a dialogue for change within organisations at an executive level called Spirit of Humanity Forum. Maureen, thank you so much for being with us today and for being willing to take on this massive topic of the mind. The mind is a massively important topic, and you could say in a way that it's the mind of humanity that is running the show at the moment, for good or for better or for worse. In terms of trying to change the world out there, do you think the mind is probably as good a place as any to start?
Well, if I was to give a one-word answer, I would say yes. But let me expand on that a little bit more. And I think often people don't make the connection necessarily between what is going on within their mind and what is happening externally for them. Okay, one is the world and the bigger picture, but even just to look at it on a more personal level, my thoughts really shape for me my experience of life. And as you said in your introduction, if my thoughts are negative in any way, maybe critical of someone, maybe critical of myself, and very often we get into that self-criticism, don't we? Or maybe my mind is, I'm having angry thoughts about something. What's going to be my state of being? And what will people feel from me? What kind of atmosphere will I create around me? And I do think we all feel different atmospheres from people. Somebody I feel, yes, I like to be around them because they're very calm and they make me feel calm. And others you say, well, I won't stay in their presence for too long because, I feel that they don't have a good attitude, whatever it is. So our thoughts are not private. Our thoughts do communicate through the vibrations and the atmosphere that we put out into the world. But then, of course, the impact on the self. If I'm having those negative thoughts, then how am I feeling? Do I have inner happiness at that time? And, it's like things become a habit. The more I think in a certain way, the more I tend to keep thinking in that way, negative or positive. There's that saying, you are what you think. Well, I think it's true. And also the effect on your physical health as well. And of course, now it's very clearly established that many diseases are connected to the state of the mind, psychosomatic diseases. And I think what's very interesting about this particular point in time is that the more positive the mind is, then that's going to help boost up your immune system. And that's something that we all need right now. When you have a number of people thinking in a certain way, the atmosphere is multiplied. And it's multiplied more than the sum of its parts, if you know what I mean. Like you can have 10 people, but the effect is much greater. It's amplified. And so we do see in the world at the moment this wave of fear, of uncertainty, for many people, anxiety. People are finding it difficult to cope. I was just seeing on the news today how the mental health systems in Italy are now being very, very overstretched because people are feeling the effects of the isolation after so many weeks. So you have this wave. And so either I can be impacted by that and then my mind moves in the same direction, or is there a new wave I can create with my mind and with others? So I wanted to bring it to that. Yeah.
So really the mind is the linchpin between my inner experience, the outer world, and the one is affecting the other in a very powerful way.
Yeah.
Before we start drilling into the actual functioning of the mind, can we first frame it in the context of how at the Brahma Kumaris you understand the self? Because many people are used to thinking of themselves as being a body, and their body is what's driving the show, and their soul is maybe an aspect of who they are. But in the Brahma Kumaris, it's the other way around. It's that you are the soul, and you have a body that is playing a part in this world drama, if you want to call it like that. Can you just say a few more words about, first of all, how you see the concept of self?
Yeah, very good, because absolutely how we see ourselves actually determines how we think. It's absolutely clear. And so, yes, you talk about thinking of yourself as a body. Well, what does that really mean? It means I've taken on board the conditioning, probably from being in the cradle, of my physical identity. And maybe, I think the deepest of all is probably gender, your culture, your values. All of that grows out of your conditioning because of the circumstances that you're born in and all the influences that there are on you growing up. And often it's much later in life that people then begin to think, well, what do I really want? What really is meaningful for me? And they begin to see the difference between who they really are and the conditioning that they've absorbed. And so when we just live in that conditioning that we've absorbed, we really are like, in that bodily sense, we are the human being, the physical being, and that's where we are. But when we wake up a little bit and we begin to think of ourselves as a soul, as a spiritual being, as you said, that's actually inhabiting the body is my vehicle, the body is my temple, very precious, very important, then I take charge again. I take charge of myself again. And I realize that, yes, I'm playing my part. And actually we play many parts, don't we? We don't just play one part. You know, you'll be a mother, you'll be a daughter, you'll be a consumer, you'll be a health worker, you'll be, there's so many parts that we play even in one day. But those parts, if I allow them to define me, then it's like I'm broken up into many pieces. And there are many different obligations of all of those parts or those roles that I play. But when I begin to take charge again, and I begin to come back to that self that is constant, the self, and I realize that this is the self that is playing the roles become secondary, and the identity of the self, the spiritual identity, becomes primary. So then, what do we practice? What I practice every day. I remind myself when I sit in meditation, in the morning, throughout the day, evening, I am a soul inhabiting a body. So I, the soul, am my body, as you said, rather than the body and my soul. Well, who owns the soul then? Where do you go? But I, the soul, am my body. And when you begin to think about that, or you begin to think in that way, there's something else that opens up. You begin to have access to resources on the inside. When you're just thinking of yourself in that physical identity, then it's as if the mind becomes very cluttered. And so, it's like when your office or your bedroom is full of clutter, you can't think properly and it takes time to do things. And when you clear away the clutter, it's like, a relief. You can see clearly. Okay, that's the physical, and it does have an impact on the mind. But here we're clearing the clutter of the mind, of the conditioning over however many years. And then I begin to open up to the resources inside, which I couldn't see before. And that's where I can begin to take that journey to my original state of being. And that is to be in a state of peace, to be loving, and to have inner wisdom. So I come back to those inner ways of who I am. A being of peace, a being of love, a being of wisdom. Now that's a very different and very new way to think of yourself. But imagine how much self-respect it brings, how much it helps you to value yourself, and how much it helps you to navigate a path through life in a very conscious way, making conscious choices based on your inner wisdom, and knowing that you want to maintain this state of being. It becomes like an anchor for you. And of course, this has an impact on the people around you too. So being in this state of consciousness, if you like, really does take us into a new way of being. And then our thoughts and our words and our actions follow. So it's actually very, very important to have this depth of realization of the self.
So we're sitting there with the awareness of not being the body, but being the soul who is inhabiting the body. We then start to become aware of what's going on in our thinking. And one of the first things we notice is just how many thoughts there are when we actually stop and look. So how do we begin to organize those thoughts in terms of where those thoughts are arising? Are there different functions of thinking, different functions of the intellect, of the mind? And also, are we aiming to get to a place beyond thinking? Or are we trying to use our thoughts in a productive way but not eliminate them altogether? How, when we start to drill into it, is our mind and our thinking process actually functioning?
Okay, let me just take the last bit first, because I think that's a key. We can't really blank the mind. We can't stop thoughts. And I'm sure for many of you, it'll be a relief to know that, because very often people try to stop the mind. And I know when I used to meditate in that way a very long time ago, it created quite a lot of tension in me. And Raja Yoga meditation actually says, okay, your thoughts are your energy. So how are you using them? So it's not a question of negating the thoughts or blanking the thoughts, but it's about harnessing the power of your thoughts so that that becomes useful for you and leads you in the direction that you wish to go in. And I'm sure many have made reference to Daddy Janki, who is she recently just passed on, but she has been she was the administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris for many years. She passed on at the age of 104. She would talk about this. She would say, there's your thoughts and your breath and your energy, and they're all connected. So that when thoughts are going fast, too fast, there's worry. How is your breathing? It's shallow. How is your energy? You're tired. And when thoughts are calm, and when you have these good thoughts about the self, about your original state of being, these thoughts are not fast. They're slow. They're meaningful. So each thought is meaningful. A thought is not wasted. That means that every thought carries a powerful energy. So then when there's a powerful energy in your thinking, what happens to your breathing? It's calm. You're able to breathe more deeply. What happens to your energy? Of course, you have more of it. It's a completely different way of being. And so this is very important to understand and pay attention to. And of course, thoughts come from many different places. We talked a little earlier about the influences. And yes, we all know it. Somebody says something and I think about it. And often another person's opinion becomes my opinion, not necessarily because I agree with it, but because I want to do what the other person wants. I'm thinking about what they think of me, or I want their approval, that sort of thing. But what do I really think is right? Am I processing that using my own inner wisdom? Or, you walk out somewhere, and I know now we go out for exercise, and I see something, I think about it. I hear something, I think about it. There's all these external sources of thought, but then there are the internal sources of thought. And these too can be many. And of course, all the things that have happened to me during my life are stored inside. They actually are recorded in the soul. The soul is a fantastic recorder. And so they may pop up from time to time. Old memories, old attitudes, old ways of thinking. And they bring with them the feelings of that time, even though it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So there's the internal. But then when I think about what's happening in my mind, I think about the ocean. And when the sea is stormy, then the ocean has many waves. Big waves, and it's a storm. And there's no stability. And it's like my mind is whirling like in a storm. And then I say, but what happens when you go beneath the waves and you dive deep? And when you get to the bottom of the ocean, there's silence. And what's very interesting, to just continue that physical analogy, when scientists now in the last, 10 years, 20 years, have really gone to the depths of the ocean, even though there's no light, when they shine light, there's a lot of colour in the fishes and amphibians and that are there. And I found that very interesting, that nature continues with that brightness of colour. And so when I go into beneath the waves of this whirling mind, into the stillness, that's where I find my real self and the beauty of the self. And so it's very important to take time to do that. And then you can see how the different functions work. So in your consciousness, there's all sorts of aspects. So, for example, yes, the mind and the thoughts are generated. Fast, slow, different types of thoughts. And then, as we said, you want to go into the depth of what's happening. There's another aspect of consciousness coming in there that's saying, hold on, I need to discern here. What's useful for me and what's not? Where do I wish to go? What do I want to do with my mind? And in Raj Yoga, we call that the intellect. But it's a little bit of a different use of the word intellect to the way it's often used in the world of intellectual. Intellect is a very intuitive faculty. And it's very much connected with the conscience and with the heart, the inner feelings. And so if I really begin to strengthen the intellect, this intuitive part of me, I'll know instinctively what is good for me and what is not. And I'll begin to make those good choices. And I'll say, well, no, I don't want to go in this direction. There's something else I can do with my mind. It's as if the intellect will say to me, or that part will say to me, but what are you doing to yourself? I know often, asking myself questions like this is very helpful. What do I want? What is meaningful? What am I doing to myself? Who am I? Who do I really want to be? And then you begin to sort out all those stored memories. And you can call them, they actually form our personality traits, if you like, because those stored memories actually have an impact on my personality. I become the product of all those experiences. And then I say to myself, okay, which are the experiences that have formed me that I really feel are valuable and right and go with my inner wisdom? And what are the things that actually are not useful? And this is where then, as you go deeper and deeper in this way, as I mentioned earlier on, you come back to that original self. And there are actually several qualities in that original self. And when you reach it, it's a thing of great joy, because you feel a sense of freedom to be who you really are. So there is, yes, peace. There's love. Pure, unconditional love. Peace that nobody can take away. Strong peace. There's joy that isn't determined by external factors. There's wisdom that is really that intuitive part of you. We all have inherent wisdom. And there's strength. All these give me inner strength. And in fact, all these qualities together make up our inherent goodness, because every human being in the world has inherent goodness, but we have suppressed it. Something in our teachings that really struck me many years ago, and I've never forgotten it, and it was that the first violence that we do is to suppress our own inner goodness. And when we do that, of course, there's an emptiness. Who am I? And that's where the ego takes over. That's where I begin to rely on the external. And then, of course, if somebody threatens that identity, you're not a good mother, you're not a good teacher, you're not a good husband, whatever it is, I get angry, I get defensive. And of course it can lead to violence eventually, because I have that emptiness. I'm not with myself. I'm not my true self. And you extrapolate that and it leads to war, actually. And what is war based on? My territory, my identity, my culture, I and my separation. And so it's now, I feel, the time for us all to come back to our original state of being and our inherent goodness that we all share as a human family, irrespective of our culture and background and everything else. And this is what the world needs now.
It's very interesting clarification of these different functions of our thinking between the intellect, as you're saying, which is making decisions, is using the power of discernment, and our mind, which is in the moment responding to things that are arising. And can I just be clear that you're seeing those functions as part of the soul rather than as part of the brain?
Yes.
Because for many people, they just see that as brain function. But within the Raja Yoga teachings, actually, you're saying that these are aspects of the soul itself, and as such, they go with you when you pass on. Is that right?
Absolutely. So these are functions of the consciousness, and the consciousness is the soul, the conscious living being. Now, that conscious living being, the soul, has to work through the body, which means it has to work through the brain. And so you do need your brain to be in good order. And of course, we all know that when there's a dysfunction in terms of brain, there's a trauma or, whatever situation somebody may be born with, then the soul cannot express itself fully in life. And I know that I have worked with people who've had strokes, and I have seen how you know that the soul is there, the person is there. They haven't gone anywhere, but they are experiencing the limitation of expression. But you know that they are functioning internally.
So obviously a very close relationship between the mind, the intellect, and the brain, which is like the operating system that allows the person to function. But you talked earlier about the negative thinking that can creep in. And I wonder why it is, when we know of the benefits of positive thinking, that we so easily fall into negative thinking. And there's this idea of cleaning the mind. And when we look at the self, we see, you could call it the shadow aspect of who we are, the kind of the things that lurk in the deeper, darker recesses of our mind. How do we transform those when we come to a practice of meditation? What are the steps that we need to take in order to bring that into the light and get it working for us as a friend rather than as a foe?
That's a very interesting question, a very important question. Because if I think of my own journey with meditation, and I was very young when I started meditating. I started meditating before I met the Brahma Kumaris, actually. And at first you're very taken with the whole experience, and you really want to move ahead. You want to move ahead quickly. You want to share what you have with others. And I think for a long time, I was practicing meditation and I was enjoying everything. And I do feel I was accumulating inner strength. But I hadn't really looked at myself so deeply. And it's very important that on the journey, and I think it just comes at the right time, I don't think you can force it, you begin to see, you call it the shadows or the recesses, you begin to see reactions. I won't even say responses. Responses are more conscious, but reactions are emotions that come up, and before your intellect and all your wisdom that you have has a chance to kick in, it's just overtaken you, and you say, oh dear, we've done it again. And you begin to see things. Now, there's a difference between when these things come up, I can then use that to even beat my mind even more into submission and say, I shouldn't be thinking like that. That's not right. It's no good. What am I I've been doing all these years, And you can then start to beat yourself up. And I think a lot of us are good at that. But then there's another step in the journey where you say, let me have a more mature response to this. If these things are coming up, then I have to understand them. I have to understand where they come from. I don't necessarily need to go into a deep self-analysis. I mean, some people do, of course, it's all personal choice. But for me, I've wanted to understand the principles of how this works. And actually, that's been enough to give me a fair amount of relief. On a very personal note, last year I went through some physical illness, and it was at that point that I realized how much my emotions were connected with what I was going through. And that actually what I needed to work on was, of course, the physical, but I realized that unless I cleansed my emotions, you use this term cleansing the soul, but I feel a large part of it is cleansing out the emotions that we've stored up, which are negative. And I realized that unless I understand this and cleanse it, I'm not going to get better physically. And so it was a two-pronged journey, ongoing, absolutely. But I felt good about it because I felt, okay, I'm doing something for myself that is good, that is right. I'm learning to be truly honest with myself, and honest with myself in front of God. And of course, then God gives you the strength, the courage, the help to take that next step. And it's been very helpful for me personally, but I've seen many people going through this kind of step and accepting themselves for who they are. I have these emotions, and they may come from childhood. And for me, I couldn't quite make all the connections. And then, those of you, many of you, if you think about the soul as a being, of course, the soul can take rebirth. And some of these things come from past births and they're stored in the soul as very strong traits, very strong habits. And so then, once I began to understand that and that I have these, I felt it's okay. Now I can step away from it. I'm no longer confused by it. I'm no longer scared of it. I understand what it is that's going on inside. And I know it was because of meditation over those years that gave me the strength to do that and to come out of the other side. But as I say, a work in progress always. There are layers and layers. And the problem is that these, or the challenge, let's say, that these traits of negative reactions or emotions, they're quite ingrained habits. And so so it's a question of us trying to now replace those with very new habits, good habits of thinking and emotional well-being. And then the old habits fade away. For example, at one point, I realized that if I keep thinking about someone a lot or a situation a lot, it means I want to control it. Gosh, really? Then I began to see how, when you think something should be different, or they shouldn't do that, or why they're doing that, you want control over that person's life. And I said, that's wrong. Let them live their life and let me be free. So it's things like that that you come to realize in your patterns of thinking, and then you say, okay, now I can think differently. And harnessing that inner strength and those inner qualities, I can begin to think in a different way and move forward.
We said earlier that it's a natural function of the mind to think, and that in meditation we're not trying to get beyond thinking but direct our thoughts. And at the heart of Raj Yoga is this word yoga, which means union or connection. And you've mentioned a few times your connection with the divine, with the presence of love, of God, or of whatever word you're using. And there's also this lovely mantra, you could say, of be mine with your mind, which in Hindi is man man above, which is about connecting your mind to the mind of God. How do you do that? And how does that translate into a practice that you can give your mind to really be focused on?
Thank you. This is really where we are elevating the mind. We're elevating the mind out of ordinary consciousness. And the first step is soul consciousness, as we described, becoming aware of myself as a soul and allowing those pure qualities to emerge in the self. Because if I'm to connect with the mind of God, which is so beautiful and at such a high vibration, then I need to be on that frequency. Otherwise, how can I connect? I can't tune the radio in when I don't have the right frequency. So, first step is that deep practice of soul consciousness. And in the very early days with the founder, Brahma Baba, the community at that time of nearly 300, mostly women, they had 14 years of intense meditation, spiritual practice. We use the word tapasya. And they practiced soul consciousness very, very deeply. And so, yes, I have all the things to deal with, but I need to make time, I need to set aside time when I go deep into that practice. And as I strengthen that practice, it actually is very easy, surprisingly easy, to connect with the divine, to connect with that very high vibration. And it's as if you feel as if you yourself, you the soul, are being pulled into a state of silence. You feel everything is calm within. And it's almost like an atmosphere of silence descends on you. And you feel very strong at that moment, and you feel that now a channel is open. A channel is open for energy to pass from the divine, from God, into the soul. And what energy comes? The energy of peace and the energy of love. And it's like you get lost in an ocean of love, if you like. That energy of love, divine love, is so transformative, gives so much strength, is so healing. It makes you feel that you are completely accepted and valued and loved. In that energy of divine love, you feel like a complete whole being again. And when you have that experience, okay, you then come back to this world where we have to function. But you know, even more than just the consciousness of the soul, that experience of divine love becomes, I use the word anchor, becomes the home, if you like. It's the place I go back to again and again. And yes, this term, Manrana Bhav, be mind with your mind, it teaches me, at least, that if my mind is with God, this is the inspiration that I'm taking. If my mind is with human beings, of course we need to think about people and their needs and plan and whatever else, but I say to myself, what am I depending upon? What is feeding me? And if it's the emotions of human beings that are feeding me, then I just have a horizontal connection. And the strength that I get will be temporary. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. But if it's the home of God, it's the home of that divine love that is feeding me and giving me strength, then definitely this is what I come back to. And this is what is empowering me. So it's the vertical connection, if you like. And then you bring that into your everyday life, and things seem very different. And so, yes, it's a beautiful journey, and I need to strengthen this connection very, very much. Because at the end of the day, this is what we can truly rely on, because God is constant. God isn't going to go anywhere. Or it isn't that you're going to go to God and suddenly there's less love. God is unlimited completely. And so yes, this is where we need to be.
Well, that takes us very beautifully into having an experience of what it is that you're talking about. And one of the things I've really taken from what you've been saying is that our mind can become our friend, and that however our mind is, it's like a muscle. The more we train it, the more we focus on it, the more we use it in a constructive way and use our judgment to guide it, that we can practice using our thoughts to take us to the place and the state of consciousness that we want to be. So never to lose hope that you have a mind that doesn't work the way you want it to. You can change that. Change is possible.
Absolutely. You are the master. It's your mind. It's not someone else's mind, it's yours. So it belongs to you. So who's the master? You or your mind? Definitely you are. Yes, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, Maureen, if you could just guide us into a meditation experience of some of these experiences that you've been sharing with us, and then we can really feel immersed in that would be great.
Great, thank you so much. So sit comfortably, feet on the floor, and just relax. And if you wish to, you may keep your eyes open, but you can blink, you don't need to stare. Or you can close your eyes as you wish. But very often we do in Raj Yoga meditate with our eyes open, because then it helps us to keep that consciousness and alertness and bring it into our everyday life. So I'll share a few thoughts as we go on our inner journey. I take this time to be with myself. As I go inside, as I use my thoughts for that inner journey, I see that there are many aspects of myself, many layers of experiences, many different identities. But yet I know that there is something greater, that I am a being playing those roles that I identify with, fulfilling my responsibilities in the world. But who am I? As I go deeper into this question, I realize that I'm not a physical being. The body is physical. It is a vehicle for I, the spiritual being, the soul. I am a being of light. And the focus for that light is in the center of my forehead. In my mind's eye, let me see that beautiful, sparkling point of light that is the self. I focus on that light, bring all my awareness to that point, and everything else begins to fade away. I become that light. I am a soul, a being of light. And in this state of being, I experience my true, original state of peace. I am a being of peace. I am a being of love. I am a being of wisdom. in this state of being with a single thought. I can connect with that being that is greater than myself, the one who is unlimited, the divine, the unlimited source of love, of peace, of truth. I feel that energy of love flow into the soul, into my being. Healing me, giving me strength, transforming me. And that energy of love overflows out into the atmosphere of the world. I become an instrument to share that divine love with a world in need. Gradually, I return to the awareness, my body, my surroundings. I bring that love, divine wisdom, peace with me into my light. Om Shanti, I am peace. Thank you.